Hi, my name is Megan Clark, and today I will be presenting on the topic of sensory processing. So today's objectives will be covering what sensory processing is, why discuss it, what sensory overload is, as well as sensory preferences, sensory changes, and strategies. What is sensory processing? Sometimes sensory processing can also be called sensory integration, or SI for short. But sensory processing is a term referring to the way the brain receives information and turns it into appropriate motor and behavioral responses. Why talk about sensory processing? Knowing how we process sensory information and how we naturally react to the things that drive us crazy is important so that we can learn what we can do to set ourselves up for success. Knowing these things can also help support us during our daily activities, and it can also help support us during the stroke recovery process. Now let's talk a little bit about sensory overload. Sensory overload can happen at any moment. It can impact activity participation and or performance. Sensory overload can also look like difficulty concentrating on tasks, fidgeting with hands, bouncing feet, or other types of fidgets, as well as restlessness, irritability, and increased stress. Now we're going to go a little bit into detail on sensory preferences. So, we all have sensory preferences and ways of responding when those preferences are challenged or not met. We all have our own tags. By tags, I am talking about the clothing tags in the back of our shirts or our pants. And these tags might drive somebody crazy. They might be itchy sweaters, or these tags might be a rock in your sock for someone else, or it might be styrofoam rubbing together, so much more. All of these different so-called tags in this instance will be responded to in different ways by different people. So these preferences may often be labeled as problems, but in reality, they are just personal preferences for each individual. These tags can also affect the activities we want and need to do in our daily lives, also known as ADLs and IADLs, or activities of daily living and instrumental activities of daily living. Now let's look at some different preferences and the ways of responding to our tags. So, as we talk about this, try to identify which one of the following two slides sounds most like you. So, for sensory preferences, we all have different thresholds. And a threshold is the point at which, or the amount of time it takes to notice something. So, for these two, we are going to be talking about low thresholds. A low threshold is going to notice something much earlier or much sooner than others, and it doesn't take much to notice these things. For the item on the left, a passive response is not going to do anything in response to the stimuli or the input or so-called tag. So these people may come off as distractible. They may just go through it and never address or do anything to get away from their tags. So these individuals may come off as distracted. Whereas on the right side, the low threshold is still not going to notice something late. They're going to notice it very early, and they're not going to notice it as often. And an active response is going to take active action to avoid it or get away from that tag. So, an example of someone who is avoiding these would be someone who may plug their ears or move away from something that they don't enjoy, such as a crowded room if it's overwhelming. And these individuals may come off as avoidant of these certain situations. Now we have a high threshold. High threshold individuals are going to notice something much later and not as often as others. So it will take a lot of input to notice something. On the left side, we have passive response. So these people, again, they're not going to notice it as often and they're going to notice it much later, but they're not going to do anything in response to it. So they may not notice the buildup of all of their tags, and then it'll feel like everything hits all at once, which could cause a blow up per se. So some things building up, for example, could be getting the car's oil change, needing to go grocery shopping, doing all of the laundry. You are out of dog food, and it feels like all of those things hit all at once, and it causes kind of an explosion of a reaction. Whereas on the right side, we again have a high threshold, so they're going to notice the input much later or not as often as others. And they're going to take an active response to the input or their tag, and they're going to make an effort to react to it. So, some of these individuals may seek out high intensity experiences in order to hit that threshold. And these individuals could also be termed adrenaline junkies. And examples of some occupations that these individuals might take on would be skydivers, NASCAR drivers, bungee jumpers, deep sea divers, activities of that sort. So, again, why talk about it? It's important to know how we process sensory information and how we react to it. It's also important to know what we can do to set ourselves up for success, and knowing this will help support us during our daily lives and during the stroke recovery process. Finally, let's talk a little bit about some sensory changes post-stroke. So, sensory changes are common post-stroke, making it difficult to focus on tasks. When there is a lot of input, it can feel like you are overloaded, and this is because your brain is having difficulty keeping up with the amount of information it is receiving. So, processing can be extremely challenging post-stroke, and it may be the cause of more intense feelings, reactions, outbursts, even isolation or impulsivity. Now, you may be asking yourself, what are some strategies to set myself up for success? First, try taking an inventory on yourself to know what drives you nuts, makes you angry, or makes you anxious, and write it down in a place that you can easily access, such as your phone or a notebook that you carry with you everywhere. And use that information to then take something that helps calm you down and write that as well. So, what are some things that help you in overwhelming environments, or something that just helps bring you back to your baseline and carry that with you for those stressful situations as well? Next, think about the environment. When you are in a multi-sensory environment, try some things such as grounding yourself. So place yourself where you are seated in a chair with feet on the floor. You can wear ankle weights if this helps. And try looking somewhere that is not as highly activating. So something that you can do is place yourself where you are only looking at the thing that you are wanting to focus on, and there's not much going on around it. Also, be proactive and do what you can to prepare yourself before going into these environments. You can also prepare in any situation. You can keep in mind that your performance might decrease before you even get to a task because you are not taking the time to prepare yourself before going into it. So think about what your tag might be and take time beforehand so that you can better perform during the task. Some examples of preparation can be doing some deep breathing in the bathroom 5 minutes before going into a situation, or carrying your sensory items with you to help calm you when overloaded. Some people use their favorite music and put in headphones, or use earbuds to block out some surrounding noises. Do whatever helps make you feel better. So, the takeaway of this presentation is that we all have our own tags that take away from our day. And knowing our tags and how we react, as well as how we can overcome them, is important for stroke recovery. It is also important for everyone in our general day-to-day life so that we can successfully complete all of the things we want and need to do. Thank you.